Karen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And we'll start off with a little bit about your background and your current role.
Okay, so I'm a clinical psychologist, and I studied in Wollongong, where I think you guys are based.
Yeah.
And from there, I worked in community mental health, and then I worked in an inpatient psychiatric unit for 10 years, where I ran a program for people who are suicidal and self-harming, and then did some work in the general hospital and at the Black Dog Institute, which is the mood disorders research sort of institute. And then after that, ended up going off and doing my own thing in private practice, and that's where I am at the moment.
Awesome.
Well-rounded.
Yeah, that's a very diverse range of things that I'm sure you've really really broadened the scope of what you thought maybe was possible at the end of your degree. Like, I know for me, there's like developmental psychology or clinical psychology, and it seems quite like distinct, but I think your experience seems very like well-rounded, and that you've had experiences in lots of different parts of psychology.
Yeah, the area I probably haven't worked in is with kids, but I guess one of the benefits of psychology is it is very diverse and broad, and the skills that you learn apply across so many different areas. So, you can work in acute psychiatry or a more generalized sort of psychology, or choose a specific area that you love. So it's been, yes, and I've kind of dabbled in a whole lot of different things.
Yeah.
So if you've done all of this stuff, what sort of made you want to go and do your own practice and move into kind of what you've been doing now?
Yeah, well, I after 10 years of working with really kind of the severe end of the spectrum, I got tired, and I had 2 young kids, and I wanted a bit more flexibility. And I'd always thought about doing my own thing. And so I went off and initially just had a single room where I saw patients. And I did that for 3 years, and then decided that I was a bit lonely. And so ended up going to bigger space, and now I've kind of employed, so there's a team of 8 of us now.
Wow.
So we've grown.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so kind of employed a team now that I've got working with me. And we have, I guess, my interest, having my own kids and families, sort of moved into more women's mental health. And so that's kind of been my focus. So it's sort of, I've changed as, I guess, life has also grown and changed, and I've just moved along with that.
What kind of drew you towards psychology to begin with? Like, did you know it was always something you wanted to do? Did it sort of dawn on you a little bit later, or did you just guess?
I think, like most psychologists, we kind of have that urge to work with or help people. And I actually worked in public relations, would you believe, before I became a psychologist.
Yeah.
After traveling overseas. And so did that for a couple of years, and really kind of just had that pull to go back to something that felt a bit more meaningful, and where I felt like I could sort of work with people and make a difference. And I was very fortunate that I got into the clinical program in Wollongong, and then it's kind of just gone from there.
That's interesting, because I was actually thinking about going down a public relations way, and initially got in for business and thought, I would do that. And then with a bit of travel, I realised, actually I want to do something with people and have something meaningful and contribute in some way. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things, every now and again I'm sitting with someone and I just think, like, I'm so privileged to have someone share their, difficult parts of what's going on for them.
Yeah.
For me to be able to make I know it sounds stupid, but for me to be able to impact their lives somehow.
Yeah.
Just through through the skills, through all the techniques that we learn. And it's a lovely, lovely job to have.
That's very interesting, because I guess from the outside in, especially for people who wouldn't consider themselves going into psychology or being a therapist, you wouldn't really see that. Like, you would understand that it's a rewarding job, but I can imagine it would be very difficult as well at times, especially if you take on a lot of, and I'm sure it's hard not to, like the people that you see and all the stuff that they struggle with. But yeah, do you feel like it is balanced in that way? Like the reward and the seeing them change their lives in a positive way, like, is worth it?
It is worth it. I do think, though, I think you have to be very good at learning what your own boundaries are and what your own capacity is as a psychologist. I mean, I'm very fortunate, I think, now that I can, if I know I've got a tougher patient, I can put them at a particular time of day.
Yeah.
Can make sure I have a lower clinical load that day. I can adjust things so that I can make it work for me. But I also think, part of your training is that you are required to have your own supervision. And that's where we would meet with a peer or a or more senior psychologist and talk through what's been kind of your cases and how you feel about those cases and the impact on that for you. And so it's like a kind of debrief, but also, a place that you kind of review the cases that you're on. And that, I think, is really, really helpful in terms of learning how, getting to distance yourself and actually let go of some of the, I guess, the emotions that you might carry from some of those more difficult cases.
Do you think that has... Sorry.
I was going to say, you get some training and techniques also just on how to manage that stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, has that impacted the way that you can handle quite big things in front of you or confrontation, because you could remove yourself a little bit more or like have some techniques?
Yeah, I definitely think, it would be unusual for you not to try and apply what you've learned to your own life. And it's interesting, though, I think, like anything, you can learn it, teach it and still not know it, but apply it eventually one day to your own life. And then you're like, oh, wow, this is really good.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think all the time I'm kind of learning and growing and applying skills and using what I've learned.
Yeah, and just being like in a practice as well, that now that you have like 8 other people that are probably people that, you've probably interviewed and want to bring on the team, and they have some great insight as well in, all bettering each other through conversations.
I think, again, as a team, we all bring in different approaches. So some of us are trained in a particular approach and others will be trained in something else. And so when we get together, again, it's a lovely way if we kind of are having supervision or talking through kind of our clients or cases, to have, again, a bit of diversity in terms of how people might approach their treatment. And again, it's part of, I guess, our ongoing growth and development just as psychologists. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of going in a different direction to where we were going originally, but I'll bring it back. For, like, in your experience, and you would have seen a variety of people for a variety of different reasons. Is there like a checklist almost that you would run through, or like some of the most important things that would be valuable for someone's mental health, just for people listening, and even for people who maybe have someone in their lives that is struggling and they don't know how to help? What would be some things that you would say to help those people?
I guess, that there's 2 sort of separate parts to that question.
Yeah.
One is, what are the kind of the things that would, I guess, be preventative against? Is that what you meant in terms of
Sure.
things that are healthy for people or that we're assessing for? So in terms of, I guess, someone who has insight can be really helpful, and awareness of, what might be happening for them and why, and who can kind of make sense of difficult experiences or different experiences. I think that's really important. A support network, people are much better when they've got people around them. And then, just general things around their own sort of ability to regulate their emotions. We'd be looking at, their personal history and whether there was trauma. So there's a whole bunch of, I guess, different factors that you'd be assessing for.
Mm.
For someone that's struggling, I always think, people, if we can sit down and ask someone how they are and really listen, most people will take that opportunity to talk. Some people are so far down the rabbit hole, though, that talking can be really they've really isolated themselves, and it can be much harder to reach them. I guess one of the things is we kind of can get put off by that, which means we become nervous and we walk on eggshells and we don't want to kind of upset them more. So we're less likely to ask. And I actually think, trying to sort of push against that's really helpful. But first point of call often is just to take, if you can get someone to their GP, or at least get them to try and access some helpline, would be the first sort of step. But a GP is really helpful because they can then make referrals and recommendations on sort of where to next.
Yeah. So what was the motivation behind the happiness workbook? So Karen has created these workbooks, and what was your motivation behind this?
Okay, so I ended up writing a workbook. I've been doing it over the last couple of months, which I've decided to publish on Amazon. And I guess the initial motivation was actually I just wanted something that was a little bit different to doing the one-on-one clinical work with people. And I found out that you could self-publish, and I was like, well, why not? I can do that. And so then started thinking about what are the skills I can offer. And, as a psychologist, I guess the big thing we're doing is working with people's minds and their mindset and trying to help them become, I guess, aware of how their thinking might be impacting on their thinking and behavior might be impacting on their what they end up doing, their reality. And so it initially started as a mindset workbook. And I was chatting to my brother about it, and he's in marketing, and he said, well, why would people want to change their mindset? And I kind of said, well, it means that they'd be happier. And, a lot of my clients come in, and when I ask them what their goal for coming and seeing me is, most people will say, I just want to be happier. And so I said, when I kind of said that, he was like, well, that's your book. It's a happiness book. I was like, you're right. Okay. So I sort of went away and had a bit of a rejig and a think about how the skills really applied to a person becoming happier. And that's sort of how I developed the workbook.
So what do you feel like are the core principles of someone changing their mindset to be happier? Essentially, like, what is the workbook about?
So there's sort of three parts to it. The first part really is becoming aware of the way that you're thinking and how that's impacting on how you feel. Again, my background is, I guess, is CBT, and CBT looks at the way a person thinks and how their behaviors might be leading them to either sort of becoming depressed or anxious or overwhelmed. And so if the first part is around, building awareness about what is going through my mind. What am I saying to myself, about other people, about the world I live in that might be making me unhappy, anxious, depressed. And then trying to build in a bit of self-compassion, because I think we are all too hard on ourselves. And one of the things I hear a lot of is, how critical we are of ourselves. And I think if we can start to, develop a really healthy way of talking to ourselves or thinking about ourselves in this world, that makes us more optimistic and generally happier in our relationships and the way that we operate and we function. So there's that. And then I do a little thing on gratitude. And that sort of came about because that one's a bit more complex. That one came about, actually, it's a positive psychology tool. And that came really about, it was last year we had, you remember all the rains in Australia or in Sydney? Yeah, it was very depressing. So we had that going on, and my husband was going through a difficult time. He had 2 friends who were unwell. And he started actually doing this thing where every day he did a random act of kindness. And that was a way he was trying to shift his mindset, because he was really kind of finding life was hard. And so we started doing that together. It was really fun. And I'd say, have you done it today? And what did you do? And so that's something we kind of use now quite a lot when, because I think we tend to compare ourselves a lot to other people that are more fortunate, or we get sucked into things and we kind of lose perspective. And so I think gratitude and kindness is just a lovely tool as a way to step out of that. So that's the second part of the book or workbook. And then the final part is just around being more intentional with your time. So again, I think we all operate on autopilot through most of our lives. And I think when we become more intentional about how we spend our time and who we spend our time with and what we want to do, generally, and if we kind of align that with the person, with our values and I guess what's important to us, then we generally feel much happier. So those are the 3 parts of the workbook.
Yeah. Are those things that you work on generally in your practice, like with people too?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, if someone was to come in, one of the earliest or first things that we would do is start to look at the way they're thinking about themselves in certain situations. That's kind of where therapy often begins, and the stories that you might be telling yourself. And then we also look at where they come from. So, if you've had a difficult upbringing, your stories are going to be different to someone else who had a reasonably easy one. Or if you had very hard parents who had very high expectations, your stories, the way you think about yourself and the world, again, would be different. So that's definitely something we would do in therapy. And the other parts, yes, they would come in at different points. Absolutely.
And is awareness something that you find is hard to teach people?
I think it's interesting because there's a lot more, I think with social media, it's building a lot more awareness in terms of the way people are trying to think about themselves. Although I don't know, sometimes I think we grab onto information and maybe apply it in a way that's not particularly useful. But awareness, without awareness, we can't really make changes, can we? I think you have to have an awareness of how you are and how you relate to people and what you do in order to start to make changes to those things. And so we definitely, that's one of the first things that we need or want to build is awareness, or help clients build is awareness. Have you guys thought about the way that you think about?
All the time.
All the time, constantly. And with each other as well. It's something that we tried. Last night was a big one.
That was insane.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
I think that would be a good way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to talk about. So last night Brendan was explaining a situation where I thought he was asking for advice, but that's not actually what he was wanting. He was just kind of wanting to express his thoughts and let it out. But when I do that, I want opinions and I want like strategies of like what you would do, and that's what I want to hear.
Yep.
We weren't aware of these differences before during this process, and yeah, it just kept kind of escalating because I felt as I was giving more and more advice, I felt him getting like further. It felt like he was getting further away, and his body language was more closed off. And I then was like, why isn't he grateful for everything that I'm saying right now? Like, I just feel like I'm really trying to think really hard and convey it as best as possible for you, and you're not having a bar of it. And you had a different experience of what you thought I was doing. You, like, how would you say you felt?
Yeah, I guess like I view the world in a slightly different way. Like I don't like to give advice unless I'm asked for it. And I think the way you grew up, the more input, the better. So you can like find a way quickly.
Yeah.
And I feel like there just wasn't much, maybe even dialogue about it when I was growing up. So it was very like, you'll figure it out like sort of independently. And like it worked, and there are pros and cons to both sides. But when we sort of come together with these two different like
Styles.
ways of dealing with a problem in our lives, we're just like, nah, no, why don't you listen to me? No, why don't you listen to me? It's just like,
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. What was going through your mind when she was kind of giving you all these solutions?
well, I was just like, does she not think I've thought of this before? Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I guess what can happen sometimes is, and this is one thing, again, if you come to a therapist, one of the frustrations sometimes is they won't give you answers or advice. But the experience can be, you know, when you come in and tell someone your story and tell them what's going on, and someone jumps in with a solution for you, the feeling can be, what was your feeling? You were like, oh, I've kind of thought of that before.
It was kind of like I was being not told what to do, but I felt like I didn't know what was, like she didn't think I knew what was best for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I felt very differently because like whenever I have an issue or I'm expressing something that was tough for me, I'm wanting your input or anyone's input. That's like why I would bring it up. Otherwise I would never. I would just work it out in my head, and like I wouldn't actually vocalize it unless I wanted a solution.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very different pattern. Yeah.
What you needed, Brendan, was validation, just to be heard and kind of understood. Yeah.
I feel like that dynamic is quite masculine, and well, my part of it is masculine, your part is feminine. I feel like for the large majority of men, they don't really need solutions or like advice. They just need to be told like, it's all good, you'll get there. And then for women, it's more about like vocal support.
It's like with me and my sister and mum, because we were discussing this, like how we saw it as like more of a masculine feminine trait in our families, because me and my sister and my mum do it constantly. Like this is our style. We like bring things up, offer solutions, and it's like very much wanted and encouraged. Whereas my dad, I was thinking, I've never heard him give any advice. Like, I wonder what advice he would give. Like, I was like, wow, actually, I've never, he wouldn't ever give me unsolicited advice, or he wouldn't think that that's what I was asking for if I was expressing something that just happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because I also think, you know, I do hear a lot though, women saying, you know, all I wanted was a hug, or I wanted them to give me kind of, it was validation. And what I got was a whole lot of problems like solving.
Yeah.
Because men can be solution focused.
Yeah.
Well, you know, go do this and you'll be fine. So
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily whether there's a gender difference.
True.
But, you know, it's definitely, there's a difference which you've noticed in the way that you communicate or your communication style.
It's also different depending on the situation as well.
Yeah. I think that when we realized this and the actual awareness, like, really came from, it reached a point where when we came back, so we were on a walk and then we came back home and there was another thing said. I can't actually remember.
What I said.
Yeah, do you remember?
I said, it happened again.
It happened again. Oh, yeah.
Like, I was trying to explain to her that I didn't want advice and I just, like, wanted to say what I said. And then she started giving advice and I said, it happened again. And then it just exploded.
And then I just walked away and I was like, no, how could, like, in my head, I was just like, how could he, like, he's not listening to me again and I'm trying to help him. Like, that's how I was thinking. And I was like, I can't believe he doesn't like listen to my advice, but really that's not what he needed or wanted. And then it wasn't until because I didn't even we weren't catching this yet until you, what did you say? You said, I feel my ego.
Yeah, I'm battling with my ego.
Battling with myself right now.
Yeah.
And as soon as you, like, showed that you had a perspective of everything that was going on, like, you could see it or something, then, like, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I'm okay. Like, he actually knows, like, what is happening right now.
Yes.
And that happened. All this pressure and tension was just released, and it was just the fact that he actually did have awareness for the situation and could see my point and said, oh, I feel my ego right now. And then I was like, wow, I feel mine too. Like, I just realized, like, what I'm doing and why I'm so, like, defensive against this.
Yes. So you were able to step out of the, like, being in it. Having that awareness, you stepped out of it and then could sort of label what was happening, which meant that it diffused the kind of the intensity of the experience.
Yeah.
Only for a second.
But I think that's what having awareness does. It kind of gets you to step out of it a little bit. They call it, like, you build this metacognition, this ability to think about how you think or about how you are. So you're building an awareness of what's happening in that moment. And then that allows you to then do something different if you need to.
Yeah. And then that's when we went, oh, okay, so what happened for you? And then you explained your side. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. That's not how I thought at all. And then, we came at it on this, it felt like way more of an even playing field once we've both established that, like, some sort of awareness. And I was like, oh, okay, like, it's not like there's not this big hierarchy going on right now. It's just we're explaining, what we're feeling.
So if you were to, so it sounds like you both also built a bit of, through that awareness, a bit of compassion for the other person, that they're not, being difficult on purpose.
Yeah.
It really helped, actually. I just finished reading The Power of Now.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And in there, he talks about the thinking mind and the pain body.
Yep.
And it's essentially like, I'm never going to be able to explain it as well as he did in the book, but the way he lays it out, it just makes sense. Like, the thinking mind is not you, like you thinking about how things should work. It's essentially your ego. And then your pain body is like your survival instinct, like the fight or flight. When you get triggered, like, you feel pain and you identify with it and you're like, this is me. And if you trigger me anymore, then F you, And, like, learning about that helps to bring awareness in the first place. And it's kind of like what you were talking about before. Like, you ask yourself these questions and you write it down and you're learning about yourself. And then you identify how you think about yourself. And so you can catch it next time. And maybe it slips a couple of times, but you watch it happen over and over again to the point where I know what's happening here. Yeah.
Exactly. And more often than not, what happens is you'll catch it after you've done it the first times, and then you
Yeah.
start to catch yourself in it, and then you start, changing. But I was just thinking, I wonder next time, is there a way that you can perhaps ask, do you need validation right now, or do you need me to solve this for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely going to take more like conscious effort to not just like default immediately into what we usually do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have described that, and also just having the awareness of like, oh, that's not what you want when you're doing that. And like, I think because it was such like that was such a big realization for me that there's differences in that it's something that I'm definitely going to be, I reckon will go, that's where my head will go next time you do bring it up. And if it doesn't, it eventually will if I start trying to like be like, oh, do this, and this one just really worked for me. Like, as I always do. And
Yes.
like, I think as soon as I go like there, I'll hopefully like catch it quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly. And that's learning any kind of new skill or building awareness. That's how you make the change. Lovely to hear you guys and the way you think about each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. The compassion, like you said before, is super important as well. Like if you get stuck in the cycle of like triggering each other and then spiraling out of control, and then it sort of dilutes out and it gets back to normal, and then the same trigger happens again and you go round and round, and you never get to the point of like understanding each other. And so you start to build like resentment and an image of the other person that isn't true.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's happened to me in all my past relationships. Like that's a large part of why they broke down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awareness, man. It's so important.
Yes. But that ability also then to exactly what you said, the ability to stop, step back, and then wonder what's happening for that other person, and how might you talk to yourself about this in a healthy and kind way, about what this other person is doing, is a really, it's a lovely skill to be able to have, to say it makes sense that they feel like this, or it makes sense, or I understand that they're doing it because of this. But as soon as you start to do that, you coming at it from a different place than that other, where you're kind of going, oh, they're wrong, they're awful, they're being mean.
Yeah. And I think just that simple act, like of you being like, oh, I feel it's my ego. I feel there's this other level that's making me act in this way. Like I can't not, like just voicing that for me was like such a huge thing, because I was like, oh, you have compassion for yourself and the situation and like realization. And it just felt, I don't know, like that is really amazing. And I would like to be able to do that in other situations as well, and build, I guess, that awareness and then realization that like, oh, it's not just me, but it's like all the experiences that I've had that makes me like this, and I have compassion for that.
Yeah.
You're not doing it on purpose to make him feel like you don't care.
Yeah. No, it's the opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just do to other people what we want done to ourselves.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. Like, wow, like that's just how I operate with everything. And then a lot of other situations clicked where,
yes.
like, oh.
I think though again, that's that autopilot. When we operate on autopilot, we just do what we've always done, or what our family did, or how things. And then so again, it's once we bring it to awareness, we can go, oh wow, now is this something I want to continue doing? Is this a healthy thing for me as an adult and within our relationship, or is it, and if it is, great, keep going. But if it's not serving you anymore, then that's where you can start to to figure out how to make changes.
Yeah.
100%.
Another thing that I could have done in that situation, or that we could have done as well, is like incorporate gratitude into it as well.
I think, I mean, that's probably a bit harder one in that moment. I think, though, I'll tell you when I do it. It's when I'm in my head, for instance. So let's say I've got home from a long day and I get home and the kitchen's a mess and things are kind of, the house isn't, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
And so that for me, I could either kind of be very reactive and angry and upset, or sometimes what in that moment is when I might go, you know what? I am very grateful that I have a family who make this mess.
What a backhanded gratitude.
I am very grateful.
So grateful. I love them so much.
It's one of those, I know it sounds, I mean, it's just an example, but it's one of those moments where you kind of could get really kind of pissed off, or choose to approach it from a different perspective. And that's kind of, again, that's what the whole story, or the whole kind of, I guess, workbook, or all of this is about.
Yeah.
It's learning kind of, we have choice points where we can either react or whether we can choose to do something different. And if I kind of go, you know what, I'm really grateful my husband's cooked for me, and you know, and I'm really grateful that my kids have been fed, and that you know, and that meant my house is untidy, I can deal with that. So that's when I would use it. I think it's harder in the heated moment to use gratitude. I think gratitude, we can certainly use kindness, and we can certainly try and be compassionate and understanding. But I think gratitude is a much harder thing in the heat of the moment to necessarily foster.
Yeah.
You can do it afterwards.
Yeah. Actually, I think at the end, like, so it was definitely, it wasn't at a
We
heat.
sort of naturally got them.
Yeah. At the end of it, I was like, wow, I'm so glad, like, I understand where your perspective is coming from now.
Yes.
And, like, I'm glad we can talk about it like this, because I haven't had that in other relationships. And I think just even with other human beings, like, I think that, like, is really amazing. So I'm, like, happy to have that experience. But, yeah, it wasn't in the heat of the moment, which I think is hard to do.
It's much harder to do. Yeah.
Like, especially actually genuine gratitude, like you might be like, oh, thanks,
genuine gratitude,
thanks so much. Like,
you can do the opposite.
You can do the opposite.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
it really just comes back to awareness again. Like, you can become aware of the situation, and then you can make the decision about what you're going to do next. You're not like bogged in it and, you know, influenced by emotions and external things. You get to make your own decisions, and then you can act with intention and be genuine if you choose to use
absolutely
gratitude.
Yeah. And so being aware even of how your body is in a moment, so when you feel heightened, to want to kind of wonder what's going on, or to notice that, you know, so it may not necessarily be thinking this that you're aware of. You might not notice your thoughts, but you might notice your body reaction, or you might notice that kind of how you felt, like a feeling, like I feel like something's
Run.
Yep. And then normally sometimes with that we have a feeling, and the feeling can then foster a whole range of thoughts. So if I feel, you know, like you're not listening to me, it's going to foster a whole lot of thoughts around, you know, I'm doing my best and I'm trying to help and I don't understand why he's not listening. And then that builds the feeling, and then we have more thoughts, and so we kind of have this build up of the reaction.
Yeah.
And build, I guess, having awareness of that process and what's happening for you is really helpful.
And I think another part that seems to also come into it is trust, like to voice these things, or even to go through it and be like, oh, well, this is actually what was happening for me. Like having trust, if you're bringing it to somebody else, that they're like not going to use it and like put it against you, you know?
Yes.
like trusting,
Trusting they're going to have compassion for you.
Yeah, or trusting that they're actually going to like listen, like they're actually listening from a place of awareness and not for like attack still.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of probably talks to the strength of your relationship, and that the fact that you have this a secure relationship where you can talk through thoughts and feelings with each other in an open way. If we can be vulnerable and feel safe in our relationships, that's actually where the gold is, as you've just experienced.
Yeah. But it's definitely a practice as well. Like, I know I wasn't able to say this kind of stuff at the start.
Like that cycle we described had been happening from the very beginning as well. Like, it's not like we just caught it and we're like, wow, this is this and now it's all better. Like it was like little micro like annoyances for months at a time.
Yeah.
And we'd only just like clocked it. It only just came into awareness finally. Yeah. But also we'd built up trust through in other ways and in other like awareness, like other things that we brought awareness to, that I know that when I speak like my truth or like what I'm actually experiencing, I can voice it. Because I sometimes find it hard to voice my truth, like just in general. Like that's definitely something I struggle with. So to have that in the first place is like really amazing.
Lovely. Yeah.
Like if it was something you're doing by yourself, like these processes of like awareness, self-compassion and gratitude, would that trust and being truthful also come into it? Like for me, I know previously I might have struggled with actually truthfully feeling my compassion and truthfully telling the experience to myself of how it actually happened.
Yes. So being honest with yourself is, I mean, it's painful sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, when we uncover the way that we speak to ourselves or the way that we kind of think about things, it can be very painful and can bring up really uncomfortable feelings. And then to voice them, which you're doing in your relationship, that's or when someone comes to therapy and voices them in that relationship, that's, you know, again, it makes you feel very, very vulnerable, and it's a really hard thing to do unless you feel safe and secure, or very brave.
During that stage that we were kind of talking about where you're trying to catch things before they happen and you fail and you get stuck in it again and you try it again and you fail again and not getting frustrated and having compassion for yourself.
Yes.
How would you go about, you know, building that for yourself, not only for the other person? Yeah.
Okay, well, you know, a lovely way to kind of just quickly shortcut and ask kind of how could I approach this or speak to myself in a compassionate way it would be to say, you know, what would I say to a friend about this process of, you know, trying and failing and trying and failing?
Yeah.
What would you say to a friend or someone you loved?
It's true, because you have more compassion for others generally than you do for yourself. Or like I know that I'm definitely my harshest critic, like, and I think that's similar for a lot of people.
Yes. So we know though with any change, the cycle of change often has relapse as part of it. You know, we're not meant to do things perfectly all the time. Failure and relapse are part of our sort of trajectory and our journey of change. You know, I think we forget that. We think we should all be, just because we have desire or motivation doesn't mean we're going to implement things perfectly.
Yeah.
Practice comes in.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed the Wheel of Life self-assessment that you had in the book. Could you describe this and how it kind of helps you understand yourself?
Yep. So the Wheel of Life it's a tool again from positive psychology, and I think it's often used in the coaching realm. And it basically divides the wheel into 8 quadrants, and which are different areas of your life. So relationships, health, work, finances, etc. And you can kind of tinker with those. But it gets you to rate how satisfied you are in each of those areas on a scale of sort of 0 to 10. And you'll see that, you generally, most people's wheels are a bit like a cobweb. They're kind of unbalanced. And it gives you that starting point to again, to reflect on where you are right now, what areas of your life you're kind of rating an 8 or 9, and what areas are you kind of sitting at a 2. How can you start to build, I guess, more balance across that life wheel so that you can start to prioritize what actions and things that you can start to sort of implement or move towards. Let's say you are extremely hardworking and you spend a lot of time at work. You might have an 8 or 9 in terms of career satisfaction, but your friendships and relationships might be sitting at a 3 because you don't have much time to be going and doing those things. Then you might start looking at, well, what can you do to start to build, that area of greater satisfaction in your relationships?
So it's like something that helps maybe like bring awareness to lots of different parts
like
of
your life holistically.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then it's a tool to kind of measure across time as well. You can come back to it and look, okay, well, now where am I sitting 3 months later? Is that, increased, decreased? Have I got a bit more balance in these areas? And it gives you, again, it's lovely, just a reflection point to look at, yes, your life.
Yeah.
And how are you functioning?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm quite drawn to self-development. Does this impact happiness? What is the line? I feel like that speaks. You wrote that for me. Did you write that for me?
No, I wrote that for me.
Oh, okay.
You said I'm drawn to self-development.
I'm quite drawn to self-development. So for self-improvement or development, how does this impact happiness, and what's the line as well?
Okay. Yes. So I think, that's a really hard question.
Yeah. Well, it's one that I struggle with.
There can be too much introspection where a person can become overly focused on their internal world and what's going on, and that they again miss being in life. And so, I certainly think working on yourself's a lovely thing. I think the more we learn about ourselves and what's important to us, and absolutely will have benefits towards your happiness. I guess we just don't want to do too much of anything, do we?
Yeah, balance.
Balance, yep.
And probably the self-criticism part of it too. Like if you're going, oh, I should be at this point by now, or if you have goals that you're not meeting, or kind of assessing, okay, well, that expectation, if you have pretty high expectations, maybe have it being a bit more realistic about, okay, well, this was a pretty big goal or a pretty big endeavor. It's not going to happen overnight. And like it's a constant short thing that you work on daily. It's not one big thing you check off.
Self-development doesn't end.
No.
So like you never get there, so you're always technically failing constantly for the rest of your life until you die. So there you go.
Well, you just had we'll take out the failing, but you just had a lovely, it was a very compassionate way of looking at self-development, that it's an ongoing process, you're learning, and, that it's something that you kind of keep going with. So, I guess it's that idea to move away from that sort of fixed thinking of you either succeed at something or you don't, and rather seeing it as a process that you engage in. And that means that you're always learning. It's part of a process.
Yeah. You can always find something that you learnt out of any situation, even if you're not like actively like, I'm doing this because it's going to make me better.
Yeah. Even if you technically thought it was a failure, then you've got more things to learn, like it's still learning. You're having gratitude for the process that
You
occurred.
can't escape it, man.
Yeah.
Yes. Failure is an interesting word though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is, so, when you're talking about, is it having not got to where you wanted in the goal of some kind of self-development? Is that what you mean?
Here we go.
I'm trying to really think.
Now the therapy session starts.
I think I just have really high expectations, and I think that if I didn't get to what I wanted to do immediately, then I failed. And I don't realize what I'm embarking on initially. Like, I set goals that are pretty high, and I think, I just think I can go from 0 to 100 on everything.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then if you don't get to that 100, which probably you won't, because most people don't.
Yeah.
Especially the next day.
Yes.
And then I think, I've failed that, and then it really takes a blow on like my self-confidence.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So again, well, what would a compassionate way of viewing that be?
Well, I took a step in the direction in which I wanted to go, and I tried it, and I'm really grateful that I was able to, try and succeed it, but it was a very large goal. And understanding that I still want that to be the case, so I want to actually keep trying. So I'm gonna slightly change my goal and do it by step rather than all at once.
It's not really changing the goal though. It's just changing the way you define failure.
Yeah.
Like Karen was saying before, it's a funny word. It sort of changes depending on.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, again, we tend to get stuck in labels or all or nothing kind of things. You're either success or you failed, you're good or you're bad. And if you can kind of actually step back and define what's another way, again, what does that actually mean? Well, failing meant I didn't get to where I wanted as quickly as possible. If you said, well, that's probably a better way to describe what went on rather than failing.
Yeah.
I didn't quite get where I wanted, and that's okay, because I know most people don't get there at this as quickly as I had kind of put on myself.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do now is kind of try and go at a regular pace or at a different pace.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's definitely more self-compassion comes from that, and being like, oh, well, I might have set unrealistic expectations, and it kind of takes that pressure.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you were a coach of someone and you kind of talk to them in that critic voice, look at you, you failed, how pathetic. You set yourself that task and you didn't even get it. So if you talk to yourself in that way, or you spoke to yourself from that other perspective where you said, didn't quite get what I wanted, but that's okay because blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Which one's going to move you closer to that goal quicker?
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. You're way more responsive to that.
And sometimes we can let ourselves off the hook a little bit, and you do need a little bit of the coach as well. So it's a perfect balance between.
You don't want to give it up. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like, oh, I've failed so bad, terrible.
Yeah.
You're not good at anything.
You don't want too much of one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I don't know if self-criticism necessarily motivates you. We think it does.
Yeah.
But having those kind of that harsh words, I guess what you're saying is harshness somehow motivates you. It gets you something.
Not harshness, but I guess evaluating the objective reality of what happened.
Yes. Yes. And so I agree with you there. I think we can be realistic and we can be reasonable about this situation without necessarily being critical or harsh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's definitely a better way of framing it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely don't want you kind of saying, again, this is that whole thing about positive thinking. I don't think we want you to say, oh, I didn't get to my goal. That doesn't matter. It's all cool, good, great, it's fine. Didn't want to get there anyhow. That's realistic. Yeah. So that's where I guess what you want the thinking to be is you want it to be like a healthy, if I was in my healthiest self and trying to give me guidance, what are the words I would need to say to help me keep going and move forward? That's kind of the words that you want for yourself. The same words you'd give a good friend to help keeping them motivated. It's not platitudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that perspective is really interesting to like, it's such a easy way for your mind to grasp. Like when you say to someone, yeah, you need to think about your thoughts and pay attention to what you're thinking. But when you just say, well, what would you say to a friend? That is such like a simple way to encapsulate that like topic that's so hard to convey any other way.
To describe otherwise.
Yeah. It's about just fostering kindness. I think most of us need help in that a little bit for ourselves.
Yeah.
Again, we're all very good at listening to our critic, not so great at listening to that other part of ourselves that says, you know what, you can do this, or I'm behind you, or you've got this, or I believe in you, or you're okay.
And I think sometimes when you've got the critic on your back, and well, at least for me, speaking personally, sometimes I see like, oh, there's gratitude and there's awareness and there's all these things that I could and should be doing to get myself out of this slump. But sort of the further down the road towards those things you go, I sort of realize that they're all baked into one. Like they're not all separate things that I have to do and check off the list. You sort of do one and then it just rolls into the other. Like they're not separate things. They're not things that you need to consciously think about individually. And it's not as hard as you think it is. Because I feel like it's your natural state and you just get pulled out of it by stress and you know.
Like so like when you say like as soon as you have awareness of a situation, it's easier then to go down the line of having like self-compassion and then gratitude, because that is what naturally happens.
Like if you were to be critical about yourself for not going to the gym today, but you could, if you just have awareness and you're like, okay, I didn't go today, it's really not going to make a difference on the grand scheme of things. I know I'll go tomorrow. Like I have the promise that I made to myself and I keep those things. Like I have that respect with myself and I'm grateful that I have that. And I'm grateful that I can even realize that in my head and like that I have the ability to go to the gym and that like all these things, like it just feeds into itself.
Yeah. I guess it's that idea that, again, that when you start to shift things in the way your perspective, you start to then pull in things that fit with that perspective. And so you're more likely, if you're moving into, I guess, a more optimistic or a helpful way of kind of talking to yourself or thinking, then you're going to start to notice it pulls in those other positive feelings and thoughts. Whereas if we get stuck in self-criticism, then we kind of end up in negativity. We start pulling in more of that because we start to notice more of that.
Why do you think it's easier to fall into negativity than it is to pull yourself into positivity? Because it feels like your natural state when you feel good, you're just being like, you have awareness, like you're chill. But as soon as like you can slip into negativity and you sort of have to pull yourself back out sometimes. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we have a mix of both more often than not. So life can't be one or the other. life is a mix of positivity and negativity. Obviously, positivity is a nice state to be in, but we are going to slip down into some form of neutral or low mood at some point. And most of us don't want to stay there too long. So we're going to try and do things to move us out of it.
Right.
But I just think that's life. It's humans. We kind of sit in both spectrums. And if we sit somewhere too long, whether it's a negative emotion, we are going to try and move out of it more often than not.
So when is this book coming out?
Yeah.
That's a very good question.
For all these people that are like, where can I buy this woman's book?
Learning is, again, I'm learning. It's a process. So I'm learning how to self-publish, and there's bumps along the way. So I'm hoping that it'll be out. I get an author copy that I'm going to have a look at in the next week. And then once it's all kind of good to go, I'm hoping in the next, say, fortnight that it'll be up on Amazon.
Awesome.
Cool. Exciting stuff.
It's fun. That's, it's about doing the new things, learning and having as much fun as you can. So
Definitely. And I think it will be really helpful for a lot of people, like myself included. Like, it is a way that you don't have to think of all the processes that you have to go through. It's like, right, it's a physical thing in front of you that can, that you have like a document of what you've done, and it kind of records, the processes that are coming up and how you can really integrate it into your life too.
Yeah. Well, it is, again, it's based on psychological principles that, I think are really helpful. And if you can practice or apply them, again, not aiming for perfection some of the time, I think they will be beneficial. But, if you find that if you use any of these skills and life still is painful or difficult, you can always go and seek support with a trained mental health professional who can really kind of get familiar with you and your story, and then give you the tools that you need for making life better or easier.
Happier.
Yeah. Happier. Better.
Happier.
Yeah. And I just have like a side question of interest, because we love books.
We're little nerds.
We love books, and like self-development books and psychology books.
Yeah.
Do you have any other like books that have helped you progress your learning?
Yeah, so the actual type of therapy I do is something called schema therapy. And there's a book called Reinventing Your Life by a man called Jeffrey Young, who you can do the schema questionnaire online, and you can find out a little bit about yourself, or if you can actually just buy the book. Sorry, my dog's just come to say hello. And you can buy the book, and it tells you it tells you about your kind of core schemas. They're like ways that you think and behave in the world and in your relationships. And then it tells you how kind of they might have developed in your own personal life, and some tools to overcome them. And most people who read them are a bit like mind blown when they read it.
I've been learning about schemas in developmental psychology.
Okay. Yes.
I can't remember the theorist.
I've been learning, but
I've been learning. I don't know what the schema is, but I can't think about the actual theorist that was attached to it.
It was developed by a guy called Jeffrey Young, who I think started out as a CBT or cognitive behavior therapist. And then so schemas like kind of frameworks, ways that you see and operate in the world. And he went on to develop this type of therapy. And it's kind of, it digs deeper than just going to your automatic thoughts or your kind of quick thinking. It kind of digs a bit deeper into, I guess, what we would call them core beliefs, like what are the kind of the deep stuff around, say, failure and achievement that perhaps you could work on.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even when you were saying, failure, what does failure mean to you? Like that, I guess that's a schema. Like I have that built up and it means something different to everybody.
Everyone else, yep. I mean, The Happiness Trap's a lovely book. It's a man called Russ Harris. That's talks about acceptance and commitment therapy. And he uses a lot of mindfulness techniques. And yeah, so I think those two are really lovely books. I'm again, a bit more going into feminist stuff. I like, there's lots of books around, being a woman and motherhood and those sorts of things. But I'll come on and talk about that another time.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I really enjoyed this chat. Like it feels like it really expands my mind and my knowledge, and I'm sure people as well listening to will get something out of this, and that brings me a lot of joy.
Good.
Yeah, send us the invoice for this session. Same time next week.
You guys do a lot of work yourselves.
Yeah.
It's lovely to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's something we quite enjoy and think is really interesting. Really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think the ability to kind of talk to each other and communicate with each other about your thoughts and feelings and actually reflect, it's gold.
Yeah.
Wow, this was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, guys.
See you.
See ya.
Bye.
Cool.